but I think we should go ahead and get started here. I see that Isabel has turned on recording. Thank you, Isabel. So I am David Scott. I'm a mission theologian at the General Board for Global Ministries, and I'm very glad that you have all joined us today for a conversation on COVID-19, hindrance or help to peacemaking. We have with us today Bishop Ivan Abrahams, the 4th General Secretary of the World Methodist Council, former presiding bishop of the Methodist Church of Southern Africa, and Reverend Dr. Jin Kim, coordinator of Korean Peninsula Dialogue and Peacebuilding at the World Council of Churches, Global Ministries missionary, and ordained UMC elder from the Northern Illinois Conference. So I will ask, so Bishop Abrahams and Dr. Kim and I will have a conversation here, informal conversation. I'll ask that the rest of you keep yourself muted, though if you have questions, you can use the chat function to register those. Yeah, and either on questions on technical issues or on the topic at hand, which, as I said, is COVID-19, hindrance or help to peacemaking. So over the past half a year that the world has been living with the COVID-19 pandemic, we've seen an increase in nationalism and some disrupted efforts for peace on the one hand, but also new calls to peace and to unite to fight the virus as a common enemy on the other hand. And so so we're gonna talk. We're gonna see what's been good and what's been bad in terms of peacemaking about this unusual time in history. And maybe, Bishop, let me start by asking you to tell us a little bit more about UN Security Resolution 2532. What is it, and why has the World Methodist Council sort of lifted this up as an important development?
Thank you, David. Well, I supported the UN Secretary General's call for the world to work together to combat the coronavirus scourge through global solidarity, fostering hope instead of fear, and advancing progress in research science through the common good of all. There must be a cessation of hostilities for governments and responsible UN agencies to do their work. You will also note in the statement that I put out that there can't be selective cessation of hostilities, and there's still hostilities against ISIL, against ISIS, and against Al-Qaeda. And I think that this is a lost opportunity to seek genuine peace and justice for all.
Have there been areas in the world where this resolution has been received and that there have been cessations of hostilities?
There's been no clear indication as far as I know, but I think that if we don't seize the opportunity, there will not be genuine peace or justice. I'm just thinking of Palestine, Israel, the Yemen Republic, an opportunity for new beginnings in Libya, in South Sudan. If there's no peace without justice, we will continue in an old order of rearranged dominance and neo-colonial exploitation.
Yeah, I think you know, a lot of people have talked about this pandemic as a time of sort of revealing what was, and so I appreciate, you know, your comments about continuing in the old order. That in some ways this time has made it clearer what that order is, and therefore the vision of where we need to go perhaps a little bit clearer. So Dr. Kim, you work for Peace on the Korean Peninsula, and you were mentioning to me that the Republic of Korea has been a strong supporter of this resolution. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I think the Republic of Korea, which is South Korea, has been played a prominent, important role in adoption of this new resolution, because South Korea has led the international network to fight against COVID-19, and also Korea is a dividing and conflict country. So the South Korea was trying to collaborate the international network or cooperation to fight against this our common enemy. They are not people, they are not nations and countries, but it is COVID-19.
And this has been a big summer for the push for peace on the Korean Peninsula, with the 70th anniversary of the start of the Korean War there, and a convocation to promote peace that had to be moved online, a prayer campaign that runs through this Saturday, I think, and a special day of prayer last Sunday. So there, and a number of other events happening too. What's been your experience? I mean, because these events have been in the works for a long time, and many of them have had to be reconfigured because of the pandemic. What's been your experience of how the pandemic has affected this sort of push for peace on the Korean Peninsula?
Yeah, I think the recent development of the peace process for the Korean Peninsula, I think it's closely related to the questions that COVID-19 may be an opportunity for us to redefine the peace and security, especially like countries for long dividing conflict country like Korean Peninsula. As you, David, mentioned, this year, 2020, marks the 70th anniversary of the start of the Korean War. We are full in swing with so many activities and events that will be taking place mostly in Seoul and Washington, D.C. in the United States. But all activities and events got canceled due to the COVID-19. So instead, the World Council of Churches launched the global prayer campaign lasting from March 1st through August 15th. And during this period, we have been sharing the prayers and stories from all around the world. And the goal of this global prayer campaign is to mobilize churches around the world to support an end to the Korean War and the replacement of 1953 armistice agreement with a peace agreement. But as you mentioned this, our struggle because of the pandemic, we can meet, we can have in-person events, and we are starting to worry about how to mobilize churches around the world in the midst of this pandemic. So as part of this global prayer campaign, the World Council of Churches, along with the National Council of Churches in Korea, launched the ecumenical joint peace message for Korea on June 22nd. So we came up with this idea because we didn't plan it before, because of the pandemic, help us to do another way of this solidifying our ecumenical bonds for peace on the Korean Peninsula, which is the ecumenical joint peace message. And this joint peace message was read online by representatives of churches and council of churches around the world, including the countries that participate in the Korean War South Korea, USA, Australia, United Kingdom, Thailand, Canada, Philippines, New Zealand, France, Ethiopia, South Africa, the Netherlands, and many ecumenical organizations, including the World Methodist Council.
And so, Bishop Abrams, Dr. Kim's mentioned the World Methodist Council. Can you tell me a little bit more about the WMC's involvement?
Well, since the inception of the World Methodist Council in 1881, one of the things that was on the agenda is working towards world peace. In actual fact, for the last 70 years, there have been three main issues on our agenda. It is working towards a democratic transition in South Africa. The other issue is the conflict between Israel and Palestine. And the last issue that's been on the agenda for 70 years is peace on the Korean Peninsula. And there's a plethora of resolutions and of statements and of acts of solidarity and accompaniment with those in those three conflict areas of the world. I have no doubt that the global pandemic is an opportunity to transform global relationships towards greater peace and prosperity for all. There's a saying that you can't let a good crisis go wasted. In a sense, I'm an eternal optimist. I see myself as a prisoner of hope. And this is a time to review, to reimagine, to push the reset button, to recalibrate, and to reconnect to our spiritual moorings. It's an opportunity to incubate dreams and fresh visions for the future. An opportunity to build a world where peace and justice is possible.
And I appreciate that you link peace and justice there. I think especially from the Christian tradition, this is an important linkage, that peace isn't just the absence of conflict, but is this deeper sense of shalom that involves a sense of justice. Would either of you like to say a little bit more about the role of justice in peacemaking?
Well, from my own engagement in the apartheid struggle, peace, working for peace is not a passive activity. It can be a risky and messy business. But I live in the confidence that, as the Bible says, that justice and mercy can kiss. And I work towards a time that the lamb and lion can learn to eat together. And with some of the signs of hope that I've seen in this country and elsewhere, there are signs of the emergence of the kingdom of God, where there's a fight against oppression, where there's working for policy change towards care for the widow and the orphan and the stranger. So I'm an optimist, eternal optimist.
Dr. Kim, how about you? How do you see the relationship between peace and justice?
Well, if I'm speaking on behalf of the World Council of Churches for what we are doing in terms of peace and justice, that we think the peace and justice is just the both sides of one coin. So we cannot have peace without justice, and without justice we cannot have peace. So peace and justice go along with together. So when you say peace, it means we call it promote just peace, and that means peace without justice we cannot say any justice. So we have also ecumenical call to just peace. I mean, all churches work together to bring about peace through the work of justice. So we are encouraged to find what is injustices and oppression, form of any inhumane situation in the world. And you should be able to identify those injustice and violence and oppression in order to achieve real peace.
One of the things that I think is helpful about this notion of justice as part of peace is that it takes peace from just something that happens sort of between nations or between nations and you know other combative groups, and really emphasizes that peace is something that we have to pursue at all levels of society. One of the real pushes for the WCC has been the Thursdays in Black campaign against violence against women and especially and children. And one of the things that, at least in some places, we've seen during this the time of pandemic is an increase in domestic violence. Can either of you comment on sort of the gendered aspects to peacemaking and justice?
Yeah, it has been quite sad that we've seen an increase in gender-based violence, and what is even sadder, when the victim is trapped with the perpetrator in the same space. During the time of lockdown, and again, I'm very grateful to so many voices from civil society to churches. In actual fact, my church in South Africa had just had a whole month where the focus was on gender-based violence, and so there is a greater awareness and an encouragement for people to speak out against gender-based violence. But it has been, as I say, very, very, very acute and very much a focus during this period of lockdown, during the pandemic.
A woman of faith of pilgrim visit to South Korea took place just a month ago in July, 15 through 17 of July. And a whole group of women pilgrims, they heard the story to the victims in South Korea under the military sexual slavery, under the by Japanese military armies, and also US military camp. So what we heard that is that we heard justice, and I mean, we heard the apology, without apology for what they are doing, what perpetrators, what they have done, without apology, there's no peace for women. So they need justice. So they cry for justice. And then we heard that women, they are not just the victims, but they are the actual peacemakers.
And I should acknowledge too that we don't have a woman as part of the panel this morning, and that's a real loss that's on me as a as an organizer of this, that to include women's voices in the peace conversation is absolutely essential.
Right. If I say, David, just one more thing about just peace,
Yeah.
just one thing, then for Korean Peninsula. When you say the peace on the Korean Peninsula, we need justice. What it means is, justice means justice, that is a peace agreement. So the peace agreement between the US and the DPRK, it's official peace agreement. That is in a way of, we can say, the justice. So we can achieve real peace in the Korean Peninsula.
And because that peace agreement has not yet been signed, this leads to a question. So the sort of the 70 days of prayer are coming to an end on this Saturday, Liberation Day in Korea. What sort of peacemaking efforts are going to continue beyond this Saturday on the Korean Peninsula?
Yeah, as you have seen this, all these summits between the leaders between North and South Korea, between North Korea and the US, but all these peace agreements all go from top to bottom. It doesn't really work for us. We need grassroots movement. So as you mentioned, David, the last Sunday was the World Council Churches and National Council Churches in South Korea. We're all together. We observe a Sunday of joint prayer. It's joint prayer for peace and reunification of the Korean Peninsula, which is on the day as we commemorate Independence Day from the Japanese colonial rule. But now, in July 17th, there was an event. It's both virtual and in-person events called People's Declaration of Peace Agreement. So the churches in South Korea and civil society organizations gathered all together. And also international presence was there on online format. And we all declared peace agreement. And we presented this peace agreement to the government, that these peace agreements should ongoing work. Then they decided to have a signature from 10 million people. So we will submit it, and this is a campaign of peace agreement. Then we will submit it to the US Congress. Then they will adopt it, and they will make a resolution and bring about their official peace agreement in the Korean Peninsula.
I want to ask both of you about one additional element of just peace, and that's something, Bishop, that you brought up in the statement you released on the UN Security Council resolution. You quote past World Methodist Council Peace Award winner Inderjeet Bogal about how poverty is a primary driver of conflict. And this has been sort of the other half of this pandemic is not just the health implications, but the economic implications, especially for those who are already living on minimal amounts or struggling to get by. Should we be concerned about and like the UN has worried that 130 million additional people around the world could be pushed towards malnutrition and starvation because of the pandemic. Do we need to be worried about an increase in poverty from the pandemic leading to an increase in conflict?
Well, it's a fact that weapons of war far exceed expenditure on food, medicines, and human security measures. This pandemic offers us an opportunity to reprioritize, and especially to see public funds spent on new priorities that will lead to the construction of a new social order that will ensure the greater participation of marginalized groups, women and indigenous people, in the process of democracy, where we will see a restriction on the use of military force, and that will move all nations towards a collective global security. Yes, I would want to agree that in a strange way, COVID-19 might help us in peacemaking.
Dr. Kim, how about you? Do you want to comment on the role of poverty, or the relationship between poverty and peacemaking?
Yes, what this new UN resolution 2532 is called, another name is that this is a humanitarian pause. So I mean, it's very important. Poverty has to do with this or conflict, increase with the conflict. So for example, for North Korea, what we see this special rapporteurs of UN special rapporteur, he actually recommended that we need to review the economic sanction against North Korea, US-led economic sanction. And because this economic sanction that we see a lot of more increase of poverty in North Korea and lack of food and access to the medical equipment because of the economic sanctions. So we need to lift this economic sanctions somehow. At least we should think about it, renew it, or review it. So it's time to renew this because the COVID-19, okay? So it's time to renew or review it, this inhumane economic sanction because North Korea is the most sanctioned country in the world. And you see they can't get anything, especially for the medical equipment.
And of course, you know, if the North Korean people can't eat or be healthy, how can there be peace? Thank you to both of you. We're coming to the end of our time here together. Thank you for both of you for participating. Is there any last words or last thoughts that you would like to leave us with?
Well, I think COVID-19 has exposed the fragility and inequality of our world, but it has further shown just how interconnected the human family is with the web of life on the planet. We only have this one planetary home called Earth, and we need to redouble our efforts to preserve peace.
Well, if I say on behalf of this Korean Peninsula, I think the UN new resolution 2532 is it's welcoming things in terms of cooperation and multilateral international network. So it's welcoming. Also, the maximum pressure campaign, economic sanction, is failing. You see it's failing to advance the denuclearization process on the Korean Peninsula. While a lot of people, massive people are suffering, the ordinary people, mostly women and children, that they are victims. So unlike this inhumane policy, I think it's this evil policy, as I understand. The global prayer campaign for peace on the Korean Peninsula maximizes our engagement in reducing military tensions, promoting people-to-people encounters, and enable humanitarian and sustainable cooperation efforts. So I think we need to redefine as we face this COVID-19. And instead of maximum pressure, but we should get engaged, maximum engagement.
And I appreciate that as a closing thought. We have a question in the chat that unfortunately will not have a chance to get to about the difference in sanctions against apartheid in South Africa and sanctions against North Korea, which would, you know, given the background of the two of you, would be fascinating to hear. But we're at our time limit, and I want to keep to the limits we have set. I know that folks have other things going on. So again, I want to thank both Bishop Abrahams and Reverend Dr. Kim for being with us. The next one of these webisodes will be September 17th at 10 a.m. Where we'll be talking about COVID-19, Asian Americans, and race. So we look forward to seeing some of you again next month, and thank you all for participating.